We're not being honest with one another's teachers. You know, it's you cut me down, I cut you down. No, it's not like that. I think we're somewhere along the line, we got to be fair and honest with everybody. Like if we want to be fair with the next country, the next continent, we should be fair with it. If it's China, if it's Russia, if it's Iraq or Iran, we should try to compromise, make some sense. Make some sense so we can understand one another's teaching. Instead of hate and anger and this one going to war, that one going to, just stop over that. War is an ugly question that we look at every day. We don't recognize it. We wake up with war, we're not communicating. We wake up with war, we're not understanding. And we're angry constantly every day. We fight for one another. We're not learning how to live with one another. That's my point of view.
I wasn't thinking about or having a practice in any kind of way, at 16 years old. I think it was really about trying to find ways to act on my curiosity. In some ways, that process really actually laid the groundwork for how I still work. So much of a project for me begins with conversation still and begins with dialogue. It's really the jumping off point for everything.
Are you color struck? Am I color struck? Yes, I am. But the question is, why?
Empathy translates for me as a form of justice. And I think its promise is what motivates me not only in my work, but in life. The things that make me feel hopeless in the world, that feel unfair, I think are also what really create the heat inside of me to make something. I remember David Lean's Oliver Twist, which might have been one of the first films I felt like I really connected with as a kid. It opens with this woman, a pregnant woman, climbing a hill in a storm, and it cuts between her like barely making it and these like silhouetted shaking branches and fast-moving clouds and disturbed water. And the sequence like just really seared itself in my mind. And I remember at that age, maybe like 6 or 7, like really worrying about this woman, like really caring about her, like as if she were my own mother. In college, I studied religion, but at that point, I was really invested in making films. So I was sort of doing that on the side, and a lot of them were focused on light and movement. The films I remember really distinctly from that period of time in college were, definitely Pasolini's The Gospel According to St. Matthew, Julie Dash's short film Diary of an African Nun, which I think was made in '77, and Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep, which was made, a year later. I think all of them were offering actually a really contemporary proposal for ways of understanding history. And they were doing it in a way that was formally really interesting for me because I think, they were deceivingly simple and relatively quiet, and yet they were able to express, I think, so much, even beyond what was immediately on the screen. I really don't know how I ended up in New Orleans. It was a weird pull. Like, I really feel, in retrospect, like I was led there. I do think ultimately that's what we're here to do, to connect with one another, to realize ourselves maybe in others and others in ourselves.
Okay, I think we might be getting good on numbers.
$5 off.
And to use that connection as like a law of engagement for how, but also like what we do and what we make. All of it really, like the essence of it is to reflect off one another.
Don't worry about it. I said, I trust it. Because she was like, don't worry, I'll do you right. And I was like, I'm not even worried about it. I know you'll hook it up. She hooked it
6
up.
balloons to get a...
Yes.
Just don't pass out. Lon, sit down while you're doing this.
That's it.
Give me some more gigs. If it's some gigs for me, I'll give you a percentage. Every job you
I do think that the work builds on itself. I think that's inevitable. But sometimes in these really literal ways. Alon Watts, for instance, is a friend and collaborator who I've worked with on a lot of projects and was really the inspiration for Alone, which was a short film and sort of the beginning of a series of projects that really focused on American incarceration from a woman's point of view, from a sort of Black feminist Southern point of view, from the family's point of view, and really with the goal of making a case for the effects being equally as important as the facts. You know, or to say actually that the effects are also facts.
Was obtained unconstitutionally. Whether we get a good or bad ruling, this thing isn't going to end today.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to set another date, and probably a trial date and probably a pre-trial date, which allows us to continue negotiations with the assistant district attorney in their office. Hopefully get an amicable resolution to the case. And hopefully a fast resolution, because I know this has been going on for so long with your families. So let's walk on up together, and if you have any questions, again, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's go. Good morning.
This system breaks you apart. It is designed just like slavery to tear you apart. And instead of using the whip, they use mother time. They use hardships. They may not hang you from the tree, but the experience itself is just like when they used to hang people, but barely hang them and leave their feet just tiptoeing around in the mud so that they're constantly on their tiptoes fighting for their life. That is a daily experience when you are an incarcerated family. You are hanging on by a rope, tiptoeing in the mud, just trying to get enough solid dirt under your feet to still live.
I'm not a religious person, but I've always been fascinated by belief and belief systems and by the role that images play in the reinforcement of faith, and also the absence of images, I think, being just as powerful. I look at filmmaking as an act of devotion, really. I think as a practice that really understands image making as a belief system, and that the things we see are what we come to believe, and that the power of that is something which cannot be underestimated and must be treated with great care and love and intention. I think the work tells us as makers how it wants to exist. I'm also, I think, really curious about the way sculpture works and its dependence on the viewer's own movement and curiosity and the specificity of sight that can occur for a viewer that is then completely unique to them. Working with archive has been one step in thinking through that, within the constraints of two-dimensional space. It feels almost like a full circle kind of experience where something is both fixed and fluid. Cutting America was really challenging for that reason because, I was intent on proving something that I knew was there, which was the presence of Black power at the turn of the century in American cinema. And creating that challenge, or proof as a rule is what then also became a method or a foundation that completely guided me in the making of a very different kind of film called Time. My intention in making that film, like all things, becomes my anchor. And much like America, having that anchor is what I think allowed us to move through different eras and even materiality without maybe a lot of confusion because the ideas, the film's rules were anchored in this idea of love. And love is not bound by linearity. Love surpasses all time and all space.
Time is influenced by our emotions. It's influenced by our actions.
Time is when you look at pictures from when your babies were small, and then you look at them and you see that they have mustaches and beards, and that the biggest hope that you had was that before they turned into men, they would have a chance to be with their father.
I am optimistic about the future. I think you have to be, otherwise it's like, what's the point? The role of the artist in my mind is in many ways there to help us see, not by providing solutions necessarily, but by making connections that are less discernible, that might be hiding in plain view, or may exist in totally different spaces. And in that way, it's like artists are building constellations, from our world, from the earth, to help us see and to help us understand better. And I don't think that will ever stop. And I think there's great comfort in that. I find comfort in that. That will never stop.